Coming up on the next edition of Power and Politics, how long will the Harris honeymoon, or as some call it, the Harris vibe, continue as we count down the days to the 2024 presidential election? And how some children in the Sunshine State are going without medical care, and what the governor and legislature are and are not doing about it. Hello and welcome to another edition of Power and Politics. I'm your host, Frank Cipolla. Power and Politics is a weekly, unbiased look at the top stories affecting the state, with a special emphasis on the psychology behind the decisions and issues that affect our lives. I want to welcome my co-host, Emmy Award-winning political psychologist, Dr. Bart Rossi. Dr. welcome.
Great to be here again.
All right, well, Vice President Kamala Harris is enjoying the love in terms of donations and new voter registrations as she gets her campaign up and running with less than 100 days till Election Day. Let's talk about the psychology behind the Harris honeymoon and how long you think it will continue.
Well, Frank, first off, it's a honeymoon because she has become a political athlete. She didn't look that good a couple years ago, and I don't even think a year or so ago. But she has really worked on her personality. I think it's a winning personality now. She learned how to speak in sound bites. She got rid of that funny laugh that people criticized. And she's presenting herself with a forward look. And then she's doing something else. She's attacking Donald Trump and making the election about his behavior. That is a winning strategy for Democrats in terms of how they're thinking they should go forward. That's their message. That's her message. And all of that together really is the psychology right now.
The psychology behind this quote-unquote Harris vibe.
That's right.
All right, we talked about the Harris vibe. Let's discuss how former President Trump blunts this out-of-the-box enthusiasm and keeps focused on the battle between him and Vice President Harris. How does he do that?
Well, Frank, that's a big question right now, because what the former president is doing is attacking Harris, saying that she's a bum, she's stupid. Those are his words, okay? And I think that's backfiring. He needs to show up with some substance in terms of what he's going to do going forward and focus on that. He needs to bring some meat and potatoes, if you will. He's got to bring stuff. He's got to say something about what he's going to do, whether it's cutting taxes, whether it's helping kids in schools, whatever. He's got to start talking about what he will do and not make the election about his behavior and Donald Trump, because the Democrats are focused on him and making everybody look at his behavior. And it's a tough one right now for the former president. I'm not sure he knows how to handle it. He doesn't look like he knows how to handle it right now.
It's going to be an interesting race.
Yes.
And we'll have to see how long this Harris honeymoon continues and whether or not they'll even debate.
It could last if she continues with the right message. If she goes off message, then she could be in trouble.
And likely there'll be a bump following the Democratic convention, which is in just a few weeks. Also making news this week, President Biden with a major speech calling on reforms when it comes to the Supreme Court. Among them, term limits, more robust ethics rules, and a constitutional amendment that would overrule the High Court's recent decision on presidential immunity. What are your thoughts on this getting passed? I have my own thoughts. Your thoughts?
Well, Frank, first off, it's a big hurdle, okay, because you need to get it past
with
Congress.
6 months left in essentially a lame duck presidency.
True, but certainly the president knows this. I mean, it's not a mystery to him. Mm-hmm. So why is he doing it? I think he's doing it to set the stage. He wants to go out of office with this idea that we need to really change the Supreme Court. That may be his whole focus, actually. It may not actually be getting it done. That seems like a heavy lift. However, I think that if the Democrats were to do a sweep and they got the House and the Senate, as well as the presidency, they might be able to then get a few of the Republican senators and maybe pass it. I know it's a long shot, but it could happen if the election goes in a wave, let's say, for the Democrats.
I think most people agree. You know, the Supreme Court came to prominence during the administration of Andrew Jackson,
right?
Early 1800s, when men, and there were only men back then on the Supreme Court, lived to be about 65 years of age. Right. Now men regularly live to be in their 70s and 80s, sometimes in their 90s. So your thoughts on term limits, I don't think that's so radical.
No. Term limits, most people in America would support term limits for everyone. Senate, Congress, everywhere. And I think that especially for the Supreme Court, it makes good sense because what you're doing is you're making it risky in terms of who gets appointed.
And sometimes you get justices and even politicians who hang on a bit too long.
Yeah, and term limits would make a big difference.
All right. All right, time now for one of our regular segments, a commentary from Dr. Bart Rossi that we call the Rossi Rant.
And Frank, today I'd like to go off on J.D. Vance. And my question is, why? Why this choice? I mean, people are just not getting it. I mean, Republicans, independents, and Democrats are saying, you know, childless cat women. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, how does that go over with women? And then he says, well, you know, if a woman is raped and she happens to be pregnant, well, that's an inconvenience. Well, how could it be an inconvenience? It's got to be worse than that, the trauma, the psychology. I mean, this guy is not making much sense across the board. So now, what do you do about it? If you're Trump, you're supporting this person who has said all of these things, including the fact that people with kids should have more voting rights than people who do not have kids. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work psychologically, emotionally to the voter. It seems bizarre. So my thought here is, what do you do about it, Republicans? You need to come up with a plan. Either he apologizes or you say goodbye. The latter is very hard, but it's a difficult choice.
That's why you are the political psychologist.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a break. Coming up, a startling revelation which shows fewer children with access to medical care in the Sunshine State. What's the psychology behind that when Power and Politics continues? Welcome back to Power and Politics. I'm Frank Cipolla, joined by political psychologist Dr. Bart Rossi. 500,000 of Florida's most vulnerable children have lost their Medicaid coverage in the past year, and it goes back to the pandemic when many Floridians lost their jobs and with it their health insurance. Enrollment in Medicaid then skyrocketed with federal protections preventing states from taking away that benefit. But once the COVID emergency ended, states reassessed, and as a result, many children now, 500,000 of them on Medicaid, were removed from the rolls. What is the psychology behind not having kids have medical care, proper medical care?
Well, some politicians, Frank, don't like Medicaid. They think it's too much money to people who are not working or not productive. That's just not the case. I'm a big Medicaid supporter, okay, as a psychologist, because we need to have coverage for people who are indigent or just barely getting along. Medicaid covers people, especially kids. Maybe they lost a parent. Maybe they lost two parents. Maybe there's illness in the family. They can't afford health care. And maybe the parents are working, but they're not making enough money to really get health benefits. So Medicaid works, but a lot of politicians don't want to spend the money because a lot of Medicaid people don't vote. Medicaid's expensive, and they don't want to have the money come forward. But kids need this, and Florida does not have Medicaid expansion, and they should.
In defense of our friends in Tallahassee, they said to administer this would cost a lot of money that we would all be paying for.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me because Florida doesn't have Medicaid expansion. If they did, billions, that's with a B, would come into the state. There's 40 other states that have Medicaid expansion under Obamacare. But here, well, that you can't use the word Obama and you can't use Affordable Care Act because that's a political no-no. But it doesn't make much sense. And it's a step backwards when it comes to not covering the kids.
All right. The Sunshine State also leading the country, we found out this week, in the number of hospital visits from heat-related illnesses, especially affecting those who work outdoors. Now, this has been made worse by a new state law that does not require employers to provide water or shade to outdoor workers. Now, listen, I understand if you're a small construction company, the workers should show up with a bottle of water or two or maybe stand under a tree. But there's some major companies, builders in the state that are not required. They do, many of them do, but they're required to do so. And as a result, heat-related illnesses have climbed.
And Frank, is this really going back to what we said before about climate change? If you start pushing laws, moving them forward, then you don't look too good because you don't really believe in climate change? I have a feeling that's what it's all about. I mean, a lot of politicians, well, not a lot, some politicians simply will not believe in climate change. And this kind of legislation, it's a problem for them because it goes against their views. Not really clear thinking here at all.
But the money is also, for some of these people who end up in emergency rooms, it's being paid by the government in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, yeah.
Or their health insurance company. Not many of them have health insurance. So as a result, is it really saving money?
Probably not saving money, but again, political posturing, optics. If you're opposed to this, then you can say, I'm not too big on this climate change stuff, So that's where they stand. And it doesn't make a lot of sense in many ways. Practically, it doesn't make much sense. But politically, some people want to take a stand against climate change. This is kind of an indirect way to do that.
All right, Governor DeSantis is now calling on state legislators to fix the problems in the suddenly spiraling condo market. Condo sales have slumped ahead of new assessments following the 2021 Surfside apartment building collapse. As you know, that building collapsed. There's a lot of older condominium buildings along the water, especially on the east coast of Florida, the southeast coast of Florida. And now they need to make improvements, and they need to get better insurance. And as a result, those condo fees are going up.
Right, and now the legislature, which I think is a good thing, they're going to be looking at all of the factors. And now the legislature is finally realizing that there are a lot of voters out there in condos, and they need help. They need some laws that make sense. And the biggest problem is, how much do you keep in reserve? A condo board wants to have so much money in reserve in case there's another hurricane or a natural disaster, okay? That makes good sense. But some of these laws look like they might require too much money in reserve, meaning that the condo owners would have to put in too much money too quickly. And it's a real negative for a lot of condo owners and purchasing condos. It's an issue right now because there's no clear road ahead.
And the real estate market, especially in Florida, is huge.
Yeah.
Especially with the baby boomers now retiring and moving to Florida. This has to be resolved one way or another. If I want to live along the beach in Boca Raton or Fort Lauderdale and I want to live in a condo along the water, I'm not going to buy that condo if these homeowners association fees are so high.
Right, and if you buy and then you realize that you're going to have to be contributing so much in reserve after you buy, it makes the price, actually, the purchase price, much higher. So,
what's the solution behind this?
The solution is that the legislature, which is doing a good thing by looking at all of this, comes up with a reasonable approach. For example, you need to have some money in reserve. So a law reflective of that would be good, but not too much. You can't have so much money in reserve that you're really hurting the condo owners. So there needs to be a balance here. There needs to be some kind of regulation, but it needs to be sensible. And with politics, sometimes logic doesn't prevail.
I find it interesting that Governor DeSantis signed this law several years ago, and now he's demanding that the legislature fix it. Well, they should have addressed it properly the first time. And listen, things change. You make adjustments. I understand that.
Right.
But now he's demanding that they fix it.
It's good that they're looking at it. But sometimes, logic doesn't work.
Good point. All right, we're going to take a break. When we return, we'll check out who is in the sunshine this week and who got caught in the rain when we present the always popular segment, Sunshine or Showers, when Power and Politics continues. Welcome back to Power and Politics. It may be called the Sunshine State, but that doesn't mean it's always sunny. For every sunny day, there are clouds and rain and such. So with that as our setup, we discuss who was in the sunshine this week and who got drenched in a segment we call Sunshine or Showers. Who was in the sunshine for you this week?
Frank, I have big sunshine.
Big
sunshine for Simone Biles, our gymnastic expert in the Olympics. She overcame what she called the twisties. What it really means is that she was 4 years ago kind of lost in space. Her mind and body wasn't working properly.
She admitted she had some mental health issues.
She withdrew from competition, in the former Olympics 4 years ago, and now she's made it all the way back. Give her a lot of credit. It takes a lot to get through that, to go and do all those maneuvers and think that your mind may not be quite there. It could be very dangerous. So she's overcome that. And I kind of like what her coach said. She's the greatest of all the greats. And I think that's true.
Well, you've seen that in your mental health practice and your psychology practice over the years.
There are some people
overcoming that.
Yeah, even as a former baseball player, I see baseball players who are really excellent. All of a sudden, they can't throw the ball from second base to first base, or pitchers that are stars that can't throw the ball over the plate. They get a mental block. They get a mental block. And she had the mental block and overcame it.
So she is in the sunshine.
Yes. Then Do you have anybody similar now? Can you beat that one?
I think mine is easy this week, really,
Okay.
folks. The kids are going back to school, and the state of Florida, again, is having a tax-free holiday on anything related, school-related. And that's always a plus. People are struggling, some paycheck to paycheck. It's always good to have an opportunity to buy stuff for your kids, get them educated properly, save yourself a little money. It ends August 11th, but the state legislature, the governor for this tax holiday for school supplies, they are in the sunshine for me.
Good. Good one. Okay.
Well, you know, there's sunshine all the time in
Yeah,
Florida.
yeah.
It's a sunshine state. But you know what happens sometimes?
However, yeah.
During the summer, generally at about 3 o'clock or so, get some showers so you can cut showers just like that. Who is in the showers for you this week?
A lot of showers for the Southern Baptist Church of Texas, okay? Last week, the pastor, the reverend, wrote a very nice cordial letter to President Biden, thanking him for his service, saying that he did a selfless act. It wasn't political. It wasn't meant to be political. It was a nice.
A congratulatory letter.
I read the brief note. It wasn't really a letter. It was a note. Immediately, there was a backlash in the church, and the pastor himself, the leader of the church, was fired. He was terminated on the spot for actually sending a cordial letter to the President of the United States. Not about policy, not about issues, but just to thank you for 50 years of service. Well, they deserve to be in the showers. But also, you know, you have to wonder how that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
You know.
I remember my mom. She used to write letters, regardless of who won the presidential election. She'd write a personal note, mail it to the White House.
The fella,
just a congratulatory.
the pastor's now reinstated because of the optics.
I got you. Okay, so that's in the shower. He's
Yes.
in the showers for
Yeah.
you, or
Yes.
that church is in the showers
Yeah.
for you.
Now you have an
Who
interesting
do
one.
I have in the showers?
Yes.
Are you asking that
Who do you-
question?
I heard you have a very interesting one.
I have Sarasota County Commission Chair Mike Moran. Mike is I'm sure he's a heck of a nice guy. He's got 2 publicly funded jobs. He makes about $300,000 a year. And now he's been accused of spending $36,000 on lavish vacations to New York, to Vegas, to California, $1,000 meals. He says he wasn't using any public money, even though this was apparently, allegedly, taxpayer money. But he says, you know, he'll prove he wasn't using it, but apparently the accusation is he was using $36,000 in taxpayer money. Mike Moran, Sarasota County Commission Chair, you are in the showers.
Not very good optics here.
Absolutely not. We're going to take a break. When we come back, a commentary by yours truly titled, Let's Be Frank, When Power in Politics Continues. Welcome back. The money that flows into a presidential campaign nowadays is astounding, and that is not an exaggeration. I would also submit that it's insulting to so many people struggling paycheck to paycheck. You've heard this complaint before, but all you have to do is read or watch the TV news of late to find out how much money is being accumulated by both Republicans and Democrats in the upcoming race for the White House. In some cases, multi-bajillionaires are eagerly forking over millions to make sure they get the results they want. The kind of money they talk about is incomprehensible to many of us. Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla and what used to be Twitter, has pledged $45 million a month, every month, to the campaign of Donald Trump. Kamala Harris and her supporters were crowing recently about big money donors now lining up to write checks since she all but locked down the Democratic presidential nomination. And those are just 2 examples. Earlier in this show, we did a story about children in the state of Florida without proper medical care, taken off of Medicaid for no other reason than our friends in Tallahassee want it that way. Several weeks ago, we discussed a move by the state to opt out of a federal program that would provide food for kids during the summer months. Opponents called it welfare. I wonder where my state legislative friends are when they believe feeding kids or making sure children have proper health care is wrong. Are these the same people who speak of family values and the sanctity of life? This show bills itself as unbiased, so I'm not blaming anyone in particular. Only those who would rather spend their millions to make sure they make more money than those who would spend their money to help those fellow human beings. This is not aimed at those who regularly write checks to all kinds of causes. There are millions who do so, and they are angels on earth. This is directed to those who preach goodwill while turning their backs on those with little or close to nothing. Getting someone elected and benefiting from that person's largesse for doing so is fleeting. He or she won't always be there to help as time marches on and new faces enter the political realm. Feeding a child, healing a child, changes a life. We need more of those people. We'll be right back. That's it for this week's edition of Power in Politics. On behalf of my co-host, political psychologist Dr. Bart Rossi, and the fine folks working behind the scenes, thanks for joining us. As always, we'd like to know what you think. Visit us at powerandpolitics.tv or email us at info@powerandpolitics.tv. We'll see you again a week from now at this time on this same station. Have a great week.